All right, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating philosophy, one that feels like it was made for the wild times we're living in. It's called the Anuttara Dharma path. We're going to break down its core ideas for how to, navigate life a little better.
And really, this is the question that kicks the whole thing off, isn't it? The source material actually calls our time the age of chaos, which, let's be honest, feels about right sometimes. It's all about spiritual noise and confusion. So the big question is, how can this ancient wisdom actually help us find a clear path through all that? Let's get into it.
Now, one of the most interesting things about this path is how it's completely flipped over the years. See, in the past, you would have had to practice for years, do all this really tough, rigorous work, just to prove you were ready to receive the teaching, the Dharma. But today, it's the other way around. You receive the Dharma first, like getting a map for the journey, and then you start the practice of walking the path.
And there's this beautiful quote that just nails the experience of receiving Dharma. It's a personal thing. You can't just be told about it. You have to feel it for yourself. But, and this is a big but, the text gives us a pretty stark warning. Without practice, having this knowledge is like being a monkey with a gem. You're holding something incredibly valuable, but you have no idea what it's for or how to use it.
Okay, so to really get what we're talking about, we have to unpack the word Dharma itself. The source material explains it in 3 different layers, and we're going to start with the biggest, most fundamental one, Dharma as the origin of, well, everything. To help us wrap our heads around this, the text points to this really profound quote from the Tao Te Ching. The idea is that before the universe, before anything had a name or a form, there was this nameless source. That's the first meaning of Dharma. It's that silent, creative potential that everything we know springs from.
And the really key thing to understand here is that Dharma isn't some distant god in the sky. It's the life force that's in everything, animating the planets, the trees, and even you and me. It's this fundamental energy that we are a part of, that we can tune into, but that we could never, ever create ourselves.
Okay, so that's layer 1. Now for the second layer of what Dharma means. It's not just some origin story from the past. It's also the active, invisible law that's running the entire universe, right here, right now.
And you can see this law playing out on every level. In the cosmos, what we call heaven here, Dharma is the law of nature that keeps the planets in orbit and the seasons changing. Down here on Earth, it's the law of geography that forms mountains and rivers. And then, most personally, inside each of us, Dharma shows up as our conscience. That innate sense of right and wrong, our inner compass.
This ancient saying really drives the point home. When we align ourselves with these natural and moral laws, things tend to go well. We find harmony. But when we fight against them, when we defy them, that's when we run into trouble and suffering. It's all about learning to flow with the universal current instead of trying to swim against it.
So we've seen Dharma as the cosmic source and the universal law. And that brings us to the third, and maybe the most personal meaning. Dharma as the specific path for us humans to find our way back to that spiritual source.
And to paint a picture of this spiritual journey, the text uses this incredibly powerful metaphor from the Bible. It's just a striking example of how this idea of a focused, righteous path is a universal truth that shows up in different cultures and religions all over the world.
So let's break down what these 2 gates are all about. The wide gate, that's the easy path, right? It's the path of just following our impulses, chasing after pleasure, doing what feels good in the moment. The text says this path keeps us stuck in a cycle of rebirth, which really just means we're caught up in endless worldly drama and suffering. But the narrow gate, that's the path of Dharma. It's the conscious choice to listen to our inner guide, our conscience, and that's the path that leads us back home, to our spiritual origin.
Okay, so after talking about all these huge cosmic ideas, the text brings us right back down to earth with the most important question of all. How do we actually do this? How do we walk through that narrow gate, not just in theory, but in our everyday lives?
And here is the absolute key. You can't just read a book about Dharma and suddenly get it. Why? Because it's formless. You can't see it, taste it, or hear it. It's not some idea you master with your intellect. It's a reality that you have to experience directly with your own inner awareness.
At the end of the day, the text couldn't be more blunt about this. All the philosophy in the world, all the knowledge, it means nothing if you don't put it into action. It's the daily practice, the small choices we make every single moment that actually makes Dharma real and powerful in our lives.
So, we're left with this really profound question, one that isn't for me to answer, but for you to think about.
If this universal law, this path back home, is actually woven into the fabric of our ordinary daily lives, what does finding it look like for you? How will you start to discover it for yourself?